Somewhere in your city, right now, there's a person standing in front of a roll-up metal door holding a key they haven't used in 11 months. They know exactly what's behind it, more or less. Some furniture from an old apartment, a few boxes labeled in handwriting they don't fully recognize as their own anymore. Maybe a bike. They're not there to take anything out. They're there because the payment failed on their card and the facility called, and now they have to go stand in a parking lot deciding whether $41 a month for a box of things they haven't touched in almost a year is worth keeping paying for, or whether it's finally time to let it go. Here's what's strange about that moment. It's not really a decision about furniture. It's a decision about who they were when they packed that box. And something in that swap, money for the feeling of not having decided yet, turns out to be one of the most quietly profitable business models in the world. I want to talk about self-storage today, because on the surface, it looks like the most boring industry imaginable: a metal box, a door, a padlock. But underneath that boredom is one of the most fascinating case studies in behavioral economics you'll find anywhere. And once you see how it actually works, you'll never look at that little roll-up door the same way again. Most people assume self-storage exists to solve a logistics problem. You have more stuff than space, so you rent space. Simple as that. And that story isn't wrong exactly, it's just incomplete in a way that hides almost the entire business. Because if storage were purely about logistics, the average unit gets emptied out fairly quickly. People would use it the way they use a moving truck, intensely for a specific stretch of time, then done. Instead, industry data has shown that the average self-storage tenant keeps their unit for well over a year, and a significant share stay for multiple years, often paying more in cumulative rent than the stored items are worth. That's not a logistics story anymore. That's a psychology story. And once you start looking at self-storage through that lens, the entire industry starts to make a different kind of sense. Let's start with why people rent a unit in the first place, because the honest answer is rarely, "I need long-term storage." It's almost always a life transition, a move, a divorce, a parent who passed away and left behind a house full of decisions nobody wants to make yet, a relationship that ended before either person figured out whose couch was whose. In every one of those moments, a storage unit sells something more valuable than square footage. It sells permission to not decide right now. You don't have to figure out whether to keep your grandmother's china this week. You don't have to decide whether that box of your ex's belongings gets returned or thrown away. You just pay a small, almost invisible monthly fee, and the decision gets to wait. That's an incredibly appealing trade in the moment, because deciding is hard, and paying $40 a month to avoid a hard decision feels, in isolation, like nothing at all. The problem is that $40 a month doesn't feel like nothing over 3 years. It becomes $1,400, spent slowly enough that it never triggers the part of your brain that would normally flag it as a real expense. This is a version of something economists call the peanut effect, where small recurring costs get systematically underweighted compared to one large cost of the exact same total size. A single $1,400 bill would make almost anyone stop and think. $1,400 paid in $40 increments spread across 3 years barely registers as a decision at all. It just becomes background noise on a bank statement, easy to overlook precisely because no single payment feels significant enough to question. Storage facilities don't need to trick you into this. The pricing structure itself does the work.
Now, here's where the actual business model gets clever. And it's worth understanding because it explains why self-storage has quietly become one of the most profitable categories in commercial real estate, favored by major real estate investment trusts, precisely because the margins are so unusually good. The first piece is what's called teaser pricing. Most facilities advertise a very low rate for the first month or two, almost a loss leader. That's not generosity. It's a deliberate strategy to get you to move your belongings in, because moving belongings out is a much bigger psychological and physical hurdle than moving them in. Once your stuff is sitting in that unit, the facility has effectively converted a one-time low-friction decision into an ongoing high-friction one. After a few months, the rate quietly increases, sometimes repeatedly, and by the time it does, inertia has already taken over. You're not comparison shopping other facilities, you're not renting a truck, you're just paying the new number, because the alternative requires an afternoon you don't have and motivation you can't quite summon for a task this unglamorous. The second piece is the sheer efficiency of the physical asset itself. A storage facility once built requires remarkably little ongoing investment. No plumbing to speak of in most units, no real interior finishing, no customer service beyond a gate code and an office that's sometimes staffed only a few hours a day. Compare that to almost any other kind of real estate, apartments, retail, office space, and the difference in operating cost per square foot is enormous. Self-storage facilities routinely post profit margins that would make almost any other commercial property developer envious, precisely because a metal box doesn't need much once it's built. And the third piece is what happens when the relationship finally breaks down: the auction. When a tenant stops paying, most jurisdictions allow the facility to eventually seize and auction the contents after a legally required notice period. This is where those storage auction shows come from. Strangers bidding on units sight unseen, hoping for a hidden treasure buried under someone else's abandoned life. From the facility's perspective, this isn't even really a loss. The unit gets reclaimed, sometimes with a final fee recovered at auction, and a new tenant moves in within weeks, often at a higher rate than the last one was paying by the time they stopped paying. Here's the turning point, and it's the part of this story that I think matters most. The self-storage industry isn't successful because it found a clever way to trick people. It's successful because it built a business model directly on top of two things that are deeply, universally human: our discomfort with letting go and our blindness to small recurring costs. Neither of those is a character flaw, they're just how human psychology tends to work, and a genuinely well-run business found a way to meet people exactly where that psychology lives. Once you see that, it becomes impossible not to notice the same two mechanisms at work everywhere else in your financial life. The subscription you forgot you had, the gym membership you keep because canceling feels like admitting something about yourself you'd rather not admit, the digital storage plan for photos you'll probably never look at again. In every case, the actual cost is rarely the thing that gets people. It's the small size of each individual payment combined with the emotional weight of the decision to finally let something go. And that reframes the whole question, because the issue was never really about self-storage specifically. It's about how easily a small monthly number can hide a much larger yearly reality, and how much harder it is to release something than it was to acquire it in the first place. So what do you actually do with this, assuming you're not about to go start a storage facility yourself? The most useful habit is a simple one. Whenever you commit to any small recurring payment, multiply it out to a full year before you decide. $40 a month sounds forgettable. $480 a year sounds like a real number worth weighing against what you're actually getting for it. That single shift in framing is often enough to catch decisions that would otherwise slide by unquestioned. It's also worth doing an honest audit, every so often, of anything you're paying to avoid a decision rather than paying for something you actually use. That's not unique to storage units. It shows up in unused subscriptions, unread digital purchases, and services you keep just in case. None of that makes you careless. It just means you're human, and human brains are wired to avoid the discomfort of closing a door, even a small one. And if you do have a storage unit, or something functioning like one in your life, it's worth asking a gentler version of the question the industry is quietly betting you'll never ask yourself. What is this monthly payment actually buying me, the storage, or just more time to avoid deciding? Sometimes more time is genuinely worth paying for. Grief doesn't run on a schedule, and neither does the process of untangling a life transition. but it's worth knowing which one you're actually paying for, instead of finding out by accident 3 years and $1,400 later.
I think what I find most interesting about this whole industry is that it isn't villainous in any dramatic sense. Nobody's being deceived exactly. The pricing is usually right there on the sign. And yet millions of people end up paying, quietly and steadily, for the simple privilege of not having to decide something yet. There's something almost tender in that, if you sit with it long enough. Behind nearly every long-forgotten storage unit is a person who wasn't ready to make a call about a piece of their life, and a business that was patient enough and profitable enough to let them wait as long as they needed to. That's not necessarily a trap. Sometimes it's just what it costs to be human on your own timeline. But it's worth knowing the mechanism is there, quietly running in the background of that decision, the same way it's worth knowing about any system built around small payments and long patience. Awareness doesn't mean you have to empty out every unit or cancel every subscription tomorrow. It just means the next time you're standing in front of a metal door, key in hand, you get to ask the question on purpose, instead of letting another year answer it for you. Progress beats perfection, even when progress just means finally opening the door. If this kind of thing is useful to you, pulling apart the systems that quietly shape how money moves, without the hype and without the fear-mongering, that's basically the whole point of this channel. I'm Business Decoded, and if you want more of this kind of thinking, subscribing helps more than you'd think. I'll see you in the next one.